gentlemen, drummers around the world, bass players around the world, we hanging out here downtown Detroit with none other than the legend himself, the great Mr. Billy Cobham. Welcome to Detroit.
Pleasure to be here.
What's going on here? What's making you, why are you in Detroit today?
We're playing at the Jazz Café here. I'm quite honored to say that it's actually like over the past 5-6 years, at least my third or fourth time here. So that's amazing. The big thing for me also is that it indicates that I'm getting my wish, which is to play the interior of the United States, to play the urban areas that normally over my career I haven't been to very often. So far it's always wonderful. We opened up in Reading, Pennsylvania at a jazz festival a few days ago, and yesterday we played the Jazz Kitchen in Indianapolis, and here we are in Jazz Cafe. Tomorrow we go on to actually the Chicago area, but we play at Northwestern in Evanston at Space. And this, I feel, is important in connecting all the dots in the matrix of this country, if that's ever possible. I mean, I think for me it's impossible. There's so many places to play in the United States. But I would love to be, before I go and check out, able to see regions of the U.S. I rarely have ever seen, like Arkansas, like Alabama, like Mississippi, like Louisiana, and I don't mean necessarily New Orleans alone. There's Lafayette, there's a lot of other places. Opelousas is outside. I wrote a tune about that place, and it had a very interesting kind of background to it. But just to get all to the Southwest, to get to Oklahoma, I've only been there once in my whole life. So coming to Detroit is just one of a few, and I feel like it's important if you're really going to play the USA, it's not about New York and LA. There's a whole lot to the US in that. And I just remember the days where my dad was a friend to some and more of a colleague to some other guys, business-wise, musicians who are like Dexter Gordon, people like this, or Dizzy. They talk about playing the U.S. and they're driving across the country in a car, playing St. Louis as if it's an everyday thing, stopping on the way. I understand that in the U.S., of course, we don't have the infrastructure that would be comparable to, say, Europe, where there's a train system that actually really works on time and goes to these regions on a consistent basis. And so they've opted here for trucking and taking supplies that way and using the interstates more. But I'll tell you, if we had one, if we had a rail system like that they have in Europe, then I think a lot of things would happen and I'd be able to see the region more. So that's the whole objective for me, is sort of like a live stream to play the lower 48 and hopefully maybe get up to Alaska someday. I don't know.
That's awesome, and it's funny your knowledge of those kind of things, because basically you weren't born here in the U.S. and you currently don't live here in the U.S., do you?
No, because I found that as wonderful and beautiful as this part of the world is, and deep in talent and all, that's one of the curses for me. I left the United States because I felt that there were too many geniuses here. I had to compete for a little small, like a micro piece of the pie, if you will, musically. And unless I had the right apparatus in terms of logistical help, management or help and all of that, I was going to lose. I was losing. And so I opted to go and play what they called, in my region, the farm teams. So I went to the secondary markets, and in the process, ended up in Europe. because even though I couldn't earn the same money, or let's say fees per concert or per performance, I could play maybe 10 performances to every one that I might find here, because again, I didn't have the competition there that I would have here. And so, rightly so, I just moved over there, actually with the idea of staying for a few weeks, and that was 1980. And I thought, yeah, I'll stay here for 6 weeks. I even rented an apartment and thought I could, just like the US, I'd just go rent an apartment and stay for 6 weeks and then give it up. No, you don't do that there. Once you rent an apartment there, you're committed for 6 months minimum, and you have to find somebody else to take it over or pay for the other 6 months, and there's a big court battle and blah, blah, blah. So I decided to stay for another 6 months. And then I decided to stay for another 6 years. And the next thing you know, it's now approaching 40 years I've been in Europe.
And it must be awesome in Switzerland. That's where you live, in Switzerland.
Yeah, I live in Switzerland, but it's visually, yes. But people are people. I could say that about, in a way, if I was a real city person, which I'm not, another reason why I chose to move there, I know some people, Eric Gale for a minute came back and was living in Detroit, just outside, because he wanted peace of mind. And this is back in the day, 30 years ago. For me, I moved to Europe because I really needed to understand what it was I was up against in terms of trying to invent and reinvent myself as an artist. What is it that I needed to do? I found it almost impossible, thus I left, to do that in New York or even San Francisco or LA, where I left. In LA I didn't live very long, but in San Francisco on the West Coast, it's beautiful. There's so much to see, so much to do, and that's the problem. So many people to play with, and one thing leads to the other. I'm doing jingles, I'm doing this, and I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, which is to sit down and say, okay, you want to run this band? How? With what? With whom? Where are we going? What kind of music do we need to play? And who am I going to lock into logistically to help me achieve this goal? As soon as I went to Europe, I was able to sit back, make a few mistakes, which you are not allowed to do here in the US, because you can't survive if you make 2 mistakes. The first mistake is a mistake. The next time you do it, you're an idiot, and you probably won't work. Right. So with that kind of pressure on you, it's difficult. But if you can get to some place where you can step back and go, okay, maybe let me try this. Out of harm's way, it's not harming anybody, it's okay. Okay, that didn't work in total, but I know what to do now when I go to the big city. That's important. And this is something that I decided to deal with, and brought me back around to coming here and just playing the United States, to play the Colorados, the Wyomings, the Michigans, not just Detroit, to get to other parts of the state, to understand what's going on, and how all of this ties together, because it does reflect what I do as an artist.
Okay. Let me ask you this. This is one of my favorite questions to ask musicians and artists and legends like yourself. When did you start playing the drums, and why?
Well, I started to play the drums, as I'm told, by my parents around 3 years old. That's when we got into New York, and the reason was, first and foremost, without my knowing, most of the people in my family were musicians, and we all listen to music 24/7, 365 days a year, whether it be Latin, classical, funk, whatever. Everybody, it's just, if it feels good, you're in. And so we would listen on these big old Crosley mono radios that were in the house that just fill the whole apartment with songs, And the next thing you know, it was just something I did.
Okay.
And I've been playing ever since. I started working with my father when I was about 8. He had a concession at a club where he played on off days. He'd play piano, and it might be a rhythm section set up. And I'd come in and I'd just play with him a little bit. And it was a great experience to be able to do things like that.
That's awesome. Professional musician at the age of 8 years old. And so, professional, well, you start at 3, professional at 8. Because they say a professional when you get paid, right? You agree with that?
Well, the whole thing was that my dad, I had noticed that he had a band. And that some of these cats, he had to pay these people.
Right.
So when he called me, to come in, I was being cheeky. And, sometimes it depends on the mood of mom and dad. You just don't walk in and say, so listen, like I worked last night. No. Ho. So he just said, I said to him, I said, so, what? Well, how much you think, you want to get paid? Yeah. Well, how much you think you need? Well, I don't know. I was going to ask you what you think I should get. And he said, well, let me tell you something. So, ask you a question. Number one, when you go to sleep at night, where you sleep? I said, in my bed. I said, your bed, right? He said, yeah. Nobody said anything different, right? Said, no. I said, okay, and when you're sleeping, you feel any kind of water come down from the ceiling or anything like that? Give you the impression that you're sleeping outside? No. I said, why is that? I said, well, we're in the house. I said, your house? No, it's yours. Oh, okay, good. So therefore, if we go in that way, how about the food in the kitchen? You buy this food? No. Who buys the food? Mama. Oh, okay. Where'd she get the money? From you? Okay, good. You ever think that she ever charged you for this dinner? How about breakfast? No. How about lunch? I know. What about the pail that you take to school with your sandwiches and everything in it? You get orange juice and all that stuff, right? It's fresh, right? Yeah. So how much do you think that costs? Oh, I don't know. It costs a lot. I said, So how about if you were to just not pay for any of that stuff, and then in return just play for me? And in that way, we'd be clear. We'd be, right? Okay, good. Let's move on to something else.
But you still were a professional musician. Now you're paying your own rent and for your own food at 8 years old. Okay, well, let me ask you this, man. As a drummer, I always wondered, you got all of these multiple pieces that you have to hit. Like you got bass drum. In your case, you might have 4 bass drums sometimes, or you used to, maybe 3. And you got tom-toms, you got floors, and you got rats. You got all kinds of different types of cymbals. You got snares and hi-hats. Is any of those individual items like a favorite, or is it the whole collective? But is it anything that, I like that,
Very good question. The heart of the drum set for me is one specific snare drum. Every rhythmic pattern or musical pattern that I develop and start with play begins fundamentally there, pretty much, or is influenced by whatever I would do there, even if I started on another drum. You see, so this said, when I start to play, I play the snare drum in front of me. There's also one over here on the right-hand side, which is called a piccolo. I combine the drums, the sounds, the tonal characters of each of these drums to make a combination of sounds that I try to sustain, And, this is where, for me, I'm trying to emulate a communal a drumming community. If lack of a better area in African regions or Afro-Latin regions, Afro-Caribbean regions, where the drummers are maybe as many as one conguero, one conga player, one quinto player. Okay, so at least 3 and someone for bongo. Okay, that's just that. In African groups, you may have as many as, 20 who play and have specific patterns that they must play on a specific drum at a specific time. I'm trying to condense all of that and compress that concept into what I have in front of me to play certain drums and group at certain times. So it's like having a percussion orchestra of membranes that are tuned pretty much to what a tonal presentation that I want to make in real time. That's my objective. When and where I need to do that, and what drums to use.
Okay, that's awesome, man. First time I saw you play, I was just, and that's how you became my favorite drummer. It was just the way you went around that whole set, and then came off on the low toms, some kind of roll. Like, I'm not.
I understand.
I don't understand how to say it, but it was just the awesomest thing I heard put together with all of that stuff, man.
Right.
So that's why you've been my favorite drummer ever since, and you've been playing quite a while now. If we look at it from 3 years old to now, you've been playing for
67 years.
That's a long. That's wonderful, man. I think.
Well, you see, the thing about it, Ivan, is that time becomes. It's almost like, yes, so is 67 years. Really? Has that been? It just seems like I just started, because there's a lot going on that I never knew before. And back then, I don't believe that I would have been ready to embrace what I am beginning to just scratch the surface on right now.
I agree wholeheartedly with. I'll say I'm just not starting out, man.
I mean, it's just the way it is, you know. It's always the horizons keep moving farther and farther as you go. It's almost as if there's a kind of an indication that you've arrived, you are here now, because you're going, wow, I can do this, and all of a sudden the horizon goes, whoop. Now we have to get there, because now that you know about this, imagine what it will be like to be there.
Exactly.
You know. And so you're always in hope, and when you start to put these precepts into action, you go, hey, I know what. Oh man, I can do this. I didn't know, and this works in this particular situation with the bass, or this works in this particular situation with just guitar. You know. And now I ask Dean, let's say, or Rick, said, look, you don't have to play rhythm here, man. We already got that, you know. Leave it alone, you know, because I really want what you do to be really effective. So when you bring that back, everybody goes, whoa, because we have set you up in a certain way so that it makes more sense. This is something I could not discuss with my musicians before, because I didn't understand it myself.
Right. New horizons always around the corner.
You know, so it's not just, and it's not because they're working for me. I'm creating a musical environment that I'm saying, man, you know, if we just let him play alone, you know, he's got this for a minute, because when we come in, we're going to put him on 2 tiers up level, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to have meaning, the right notes at the right time. And that's a Ron Carterism. And guess where you got that from? Detroit. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay, man, I didn't want to keep you, man. I got a couple of more questions, if you don't mind. I was always curious about, and you should know, have some knowledge of this. I was always curious about the relationship, me being a bass player.
Okay.
And our sound person, by the way, she played drums with me.
Okay.
And is there a certain relationship that drummers and bass players share that no other instrument share, you know? People
Yes.
say that all the time.
Yes. Okay. The first, if you're going to be synchronized with anyone as a bassist, as a percussionist, it's going to be you two. Okay. Wherever the fallback for both of you, for both instruments, is like, okay, where's this people? I mean, when Ornette starts to play out, and they're playing on chord changes, right? The only person that's really playing the root notes, bass player. Drummer got to be in sync with to know where the form of the music is. The bass player. Everybody can go and catch a bus and leave and go to Los Angeles, and while the gig is in New York. But the bass player and the drums, they got to be here because that's how we're going to get paid.
You hear that, musicians? Sync up with your drummers. Drummers sync up.
Yeah, and it's not about not just about tempo and time. It's about selectivity. It's about understanding how to phrase, when to slow down, when to speed up. If that's what you need to do, how generally to play musically.
Okay, good, man. Last question. So you here tonight in Detroit? You're doing the Spectrum 40 tour. It's called the Spectrum 40 tour. Kind of like a revisit. Well, your first album's called Spectrum. I guess it's 40 years later now. That's the way I put it together. Who's playing with you tonight?
My colleagues are guitarist Dean Brown, bassist Rick Farabracci,
Killer.
and keyboardist / drummer Gary Husband, who, by the way, also sings and plays guitar. Dirty dog.
And if we wanted to, hopefully you allow me to do a little footage tonight, maybe a song.
One song would be nice.
Okay, one song would be nice. All right, so if we wanted to keep up with you, your career,
Yes.
and those new horizons that you reach,
Yes.
how do we do that? You got a website or something?
Facebook / Billy Cobham. Actually, Facebook / Bill Cobham. BILL Cobham. Okay? Or www.billycobham.com. And that'll get it. Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, bass players around the world, drummers around the world. I'd like to thank our special guest, Mr. Billy Cobham, the legend on drums, for hanging out with us. And we're gonna go take a look at that song, that one song he said that I can
Okay, no
do a
problem.
video on.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.